We are taking one more look at Claridge, Pennsylvania, the last one. Slick and Shiny tongue-in-cheek productions once more stumbles our way through a maze of digital nonsense to give you a look at local history. This is the area we're looking at. There's actually three distinct areas that grew up separately. This is Qton over here. The middle part is where the place actually began. The mine was up here and the town was down here. And then a second mine started up from the mine area was here, and then the town developed out this way. And there was a company store right down around here. The next thing we should see will be out in Qton, out here. Qton was actually the last area to develop. Not until the 1920s did that area have a mine out there. This was probably around, maybe around 1940. This car looks like 1940-ish. This one is definitely from the 1930s. This one could be late 30s or into the 40s. Now we go into Main Street, the main drag in Claridge. This was Anton Urina's store, and it is still there, but not looking like that. This building right here, that is the building that was Anton Urina's store. A lot of things have changed. When you look at history, one of the things you realize how much change happens. Another shot looking down Main Street in Claridge. We look up at some of these old houses. These houses were built by the mine. Most of these were duplexes. They were built for two families. As they were originally built, most of them had two chimneys, one on each end, which means each family would take care of their own heating unit. But as time went on and the mine shut down, one individual family took them over and adapted them for their own use. What we were looking at was along the main drag here in Claridge. And you notice there's a street here called School Street. Well, what we see next should be the school. 1914 in Claridge. If you're from Claridge, you might have some of these people as your ancestors. These kids probably all had people who worked in the mine as their fathers. Now, the part of Claridge we've been looking at is the one over here, the red area. The school was right along this street here, School Street along here. Claridge started in this green area in the 1880s, and then 1891, the mine over here started up. It wasn't until the 1920s that the Q mine became a major factor. Now, this guy is J. Howard Patton. He is the guy responsible for developing the mine that developed over here in the red area. Patton showed up there in the 1880s, about 1885, with a guy named Gross. Ezra Gross was from Greensburg. Patton was from Altoona. That's a shot of Altoona. Patton and his family moved into Altoona when Patton was about 1 or 2 years old. And when he was in his 30s, after having worked for the railroad for around 10 years, he moved out to Claridge. He was working not in the shops. These are the shops. He was working in the offices of the railroad, the superintendent's office. Patton spent about 4 years in Claridge. He was developing, at first, the company store, and then he got onto the mine. 1891, he opened the second mine in Claridge, the Claridge Gas Coal Company, which was eventually bought out by Keystone Coal. His partner, named Gross, was on the board of directors of Keystone Coal. In 1889, Patton moved into Greensburg, and this is the house he moved into. He wasn't poor. His father had been mayor of Altoona. His brother worked in Philadelphia in the office of the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad. This is the house that Patton lived in. It's still there. It's been broken up into several apartments, and it's fortunately well taken care of. Now, this is the guy named Gross, Ezra Marion Gross. He and Patton started the company store in Claridge. Gross got into a lot of work in coal. He started out as a teacher, actually, but he got into mercantile business, then into the coal business. And by 1902, when Keystone Coal bought that mine that Patton had started, Gross was on the board of directors of Keystone Coal. There were a lot of connections of these things which no one has bothered to write down. And if I were doing an in-depth survey of these things, I would go into that. I have to remind myself that I'm doing a survey, not an in-depth survey, but just a survey of local history. And if I get into depth in all these things, I'm going to simply spend too much time in one place. This was Gross's house in Greensburg. That was on West Otterman Street. And the guy was not poor. This was his summer home out in Hempfield Township, out toward Jeanette. And what you see is a streetcar line going by. This is a streetcar. That's a streetcar that went out from Greensburg to Jeanette and points beyond. Now, I'd like to tell you that this was the store that the Patton and Gross started in Claridge as the company store, but it's not. That company store has been torn down. But I just want to point out the fact that there were other commercial ventures in Claridge. This was one of them, and through the years has been repurposed and used for other means. This is a construction company, present tense, using it. This is another building that no doubt dates from the time of the mines. The last mine in Claridge shut down in 1932. That was the Denmark mine. And this was no doubt an ongoing business when the mines were running in Claridge. You can see some of the company houses down the road here. What you can see is there were also Slovenians in Claridge, Slovenians' national home. The mines tended to draw a lot of ethnic types from Europe. They were immigrants just coming over and needed jobs, and the mines were places where you could go if you were an immigrant and needed a place to get started in a new country. This aerial photo from 1939 gives you an image what things looked like after the mine had shut down. By 1939, the mine had shut down, all the mines in Claridge. This was where the mine first started. Denmark mine was here. Second mine was over here. That was the Claridge Gas Coal Company, bought out by Keystone Coal. There was another mine out here at Q-Town, which only was about a 5-year proposition, but that helped carry on things for people. Now this is present tense. We're looking down on the areas that were the mines. The first mine, the Denmark mine, was right here. This street is called Denmark Street, recalling the mine. The second mine was down in here, in this area. There was a siding from the railroad coming down in here to service this mine, which eventually became Keystone Coal and Coke's mine. This mine over here eventually became Westmoreland Coal's mine. Now we're looking at topo maps. This up here was the first mine, up here, the Denmark mine. This down here was the second mine. We notice Bushy Run battlefield down here. A very important site of the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War was back in the 1700s, in the 1760s, about 1763. Colonel Henry Bouquet, he eventually became a general, but at this point he was only a colonel. And he was leading a bunch out, about 500 troops out to Pittsburgh to defend the garrison out there, which was under attack by Indians. The Indians found out he was coming, and so they ambushed him at this site, Bushy Run. Fortunately for Bouquet and his soldiers, he was a very smart general and was able to trick the Indians into retreating at a point where, when they retreated, the Scotch Highlanders came in at them with bayonets, and then other of his men came in from the sides. And this was pretty much the end of the French and Indian War in this area. The French and Indian War was actually a European war, the 7 Years' War, that France and England were waging, and they were waging it in this country also. And this was toward the end of it, about the end. And when J. Howard Patton, the guy that was running the mine, one of the mines in Claridge, was at Claridge for 4 years. He was at Claridge for about until 1889, until he moved into Greensburg. When he was at Claridge, one of the farmers around there sold him this gun that they found in their fields. It was a gun from the French and Indian War, that, the Bushy Run battle. It was in pretty bad shape, and he had it reworked. He had it refurbished. He had the stock put back on it, and the flintlock fixed and everything. But I think this is about the end of what we have to say about Claridge. And thanks for coming along on the trip. And we'll have another trip for another place, another time, and we'll see you again. Bye now.